Well, welcome everyone to November meetup for our Australian and New Zealand WVD user group. So we've got quite a crowd building up now as well. So it's really good to see. And to begin with, I would like to welcome everyone to start with. We have international visitors today, again visiting us from Belgium. We have presenter Simon from Sweden, and probably a few more people will be joining from overseas as well. So not only Australia and New Zealand, but from overseas, other places as well. So welcome, and I will then turn my camera off to maximize the presentation screen now, and we'll just quickly go through the introduction to begin with. Alrighty, so yeah, about session, housekeeping items first. So during the presentation, it's best to use chat, and it's best if you guys mute your sound and turn off video so that presenter doesn't get distracted. And also, it's okay to ask questions in the chat at any point in time. I'll be monitoring chat, and I'll be collecting all the questions. I'll be reading them out probably closer to maybe in the middle or closer to the end of presentation for Q&A for presenter, and it will be very handy if you guys continue asking questions. Whatever comes to your mind straight away, pop it into chat, and we'll voice it out. I'll read it out. So right, presenters, yeah, video are probably best to maximize, to turn off to maximize shared screen view during the presentation. And session will be recorded. We'll post it soon to the YouTube channel as well, our recording. So let's see, what's today's agenda? We've got opening, then we have news by Philip, and followed by Q&A, and then we have a 6:30 p.m. session with kindly provided by Simon, joining from Sweden, and he's principal technical architect of TRUESEC Infrastructure AB. So we're really looking forward to this session, and many of our members were asking for this kind of material and content. By 7:15, we'll have Ask Me Anything, handled by Roshan, and then by 7:30, this is our kind of official part ends. This is our opportunity for a group photo as well, with all the cameras open and microphones open as well. But having said that, even at 7:15, we can already open microphones and cameras as well. So it's a relaxed user group, informal kind of, so we don't have to stress too much about it. All right, so just some info about myself. I'll just run through it. We've got quite a few repeating members here. So currently MD for Easy Thinprint Australia, and so organizing this group and also the LinkedIn group as well. Contact details are there below, and if we go to the next one, about the groups, we've had this group was initiated around April by a few guys in Europe. So it's Neil McLaughlin, Stefan, and Patrick. And so we've got now 10+ groups worldwide, so quite a significant presence now in groups. And as you can see, the numbers are pretty good as well on consumption of content, on how many people actually attending events, and so forth. The website for the community group is wvdcommunity.com, if I'm not mistaken. So you're welcome to take a look at the site as well. Alrighty, so the user counts for groups, I think it's a little bit higher now. these numbers might be a little bit out of date by a few weeks. So I apologize, but you can actually, if you take a look at Meetup, most of them are Meetup, you can take a look at the current numbers, and the numbers keep on growing. All right, and so what to expect? We're meeting up once a month, and we'll present latest news and hot topics, what you guys often ask in a survey that we actually introduce in the registration. It is really helpful when you put in your topic suggestions for next meetings. So that is really commendable, and it's really helpful to us as well, to organizers, to find a strong content for you that's interesting and that's really useful to you. So recordings will be available on YouTube, and hopefully in Q1 and next year we might do some actual physical sessions as well. And don't forget, this community is for you, so feel free to share something if you have any topics, any presentations you would like to put together for the group. So just reach out and let us know. And before we begin, I suppose I just would like to quickly check in with you guys in the chat where everyone is actually joining from. Would be very nice to see if you can just pop in your city where you're actually joining from. So we already have, so I can see Dirk from Belgium. Yes, welcome. And we have our presenter Simon from from Sweden. And yes, Andrew, welcome from Melbourne, Australia. Yes, welcome guys, welcome Andrew, welcome Simon. And we've got quite a few here in the crowd as well. Mohammed, welcome. Mohammed is from Sydney, so welcome Mohammed. Excellent. So alrighty, so well, let's we've got a few people joining us now, and keep on joining. So let's then kick off the next part of the presentation. So I will introduce our guest presenter for WVD News, and that will be Philip. And so Philip, let me just give you the presenter permissions there. Okay, hopefully you're right to go, Philip.
Thanks, Zane. Hi, everyone. And it's nice to see people still arriving. I hope no one had any issues with joining the meeting, because we don't get our usual crowd of 20-30 people. For some reason, I was just concerned maybe there are some technical issues with GoToMeeting or anything of that nature. Okay, so let me start sharing, and I appreciate that I'm given the opportunity to talk about the updates or news in the area of WVD. As you can imagine, this is probably one of the most, if not the most fast-paced areas of Microsoft today, in Azure in particular, and there are quite a few things that happened over the last months. These are just my highlights, right? If you know of specific updates, of specific news that you reckon are newsworthy, definitely bring them up, right? And it's easy to miss things. We probably subscribed to Twitter feeds of similar people if you are interested in WVD in depth and if you're following what's happening on the edge. But with that out of the way, big deal, the RDP short path. I've heard many customers who are addressing enterprise level clients praising this option as, I don't know, one of the most important options, one of the most important features that was requested and that is now in preview. In very short description of it, if you haven't heard about it, I encourage you to go out and check, but it enables us to use direct peer-to-peer bypass gateway option to connect to WVD. Yes, you will need to have line of sight. Was it a question?
Yeah, and that was over UDP instead of RDP, is it?
No, the feature is called RDP short path, but the protocol it's going to use would be URCP UDP.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that enables you to get that direct line of sight peer-to-peer connection. So potential to reduce the latency, potential to use your express route if you're in that environment with express route from on-prem or kind of office WAN connectivity. There is a potential for quality of service settings to shape the traffic the right way, to prioritize it the right way. And there is also potential to have a throttling available going forward. Again, it is only in preview right now. Yes, you will need direct line of sight from your client to WVD session hosts, which means kind of internal IP to internal IP. But the perception of this feature and how it was requested, particularly by enterprise-grade customers, is amazing. It's great to see this progress. I don't know when it's going to go GA. This is something we need to ask our Microsoft friends, but it is in preview. You can trial it. You can see how it can reduce your latency. Okay, Microsoft also released RDP protocol bandwidth requirements. And by the way, I can kind of accumulated those links, so it's a messy slide, I'm sorry, but at least you have those links directly available. And if we share the slides after the session, you can just click through so you don't have to Google for it. RDP protocol bandwidth requirements. So it is now a more or less comprehensive document which will demonstrate you different scenarios and expected bandwidth utilization in those different user scenarios. What was interesting for me to see personally is that frame encoding, an effect of the frame encoding on a bandwidth reduction. If you're using media rich, or your user base is using media rich environments, so video conferencing, presentations, rapidly changing high-res content on their screen, it can be interesting to use GPU-enabled session hosts for that kind of user base, because you can enable frame encoding in that case, and you can actually reduce the bandwidth that those users will require as well. So this is an interesting point to explore. Have a read at the docker, have a look at the requirements or recommendations that Microsoft published, and kind of make your own judgment. FS Logics update, release 2009. I'm not going to go into details. Go check it out. What has changed from what I have seen? A few bug fixes. Hopefully, some of the annoying or niggling issues you might have experienced are now gone. I'm not going to go into details. Go out and check it out. What was interesting for me to see, and this is not directly WVD function, but more of a Azure functionality, is that now we have an option to change premium SSD performance tier. You need to deallocate the VM, yeah, that's still a requirement, but there is no need to change the disk size, etc. You can just change the performance tier. Can be interesting for some performance troubleshooting scenarios. There is an improvement or new generally available features to Azure Shared Image Gallery. Quite a few features, to be honest. There is a capture VM option. There is an option to create image version from disk. You can copy versions across shared galleries. You can create managed disk from image versions. So pretty exciting to see, especially for those who manage multiple customized images and rely on Azure Shared Image Gallery. Those new features go in GA, probably a good addition, probably something that will make someone smile a bit more. For those who attended previous sessions and heard me talking, in the WVD space, you know that I'm a big fan of WVD Admin Tool by Marcel Murer from Sepago. He just keeps improving it. I'm bringing it up here because it's a community tool. It's free for you to use. It's not bound to the vendor he's working for. Again, community tool, free to use. New functionality. He makes it even easier. He makes an option to trigger session host updates or custom script execution directly from the GUI. You can enable that RDP short path directly from a GUI. It's pretty robust tool and shaping up to be even better with every iteration. Microsoft has released WVD specific Azure Advisor updates. Again, go and check it out. There would be probably, if you rely on Azure Advisor, right, the recommendations can be useful, particularly in a larger, more complex environments, or if you're just finding your way through Azure today. Even basic recommendations by Azure Advisor can be useful. So now the portfolio of that advice available is widened to have more WVD specific options presented to us. That's really it for me. I just wanted to bring up highlights, what I was impressed with, and a bit of a kind of inside view and a few details around those updates. If you have anything else to share, please feel free. Unmute yourself, paste in the chat, or ask a question. I'll try to answer if I can. Going once, going twice, gone. So, sorry, I'm just going to check the chat if there are any questions there.
Yeah, let's see. So I've got, okay, we've got Dirk is asking, okay, any ideas on the numbers, but I think he's, Dirk, would you like to elaborate? Sorry, what are you trying to say? What your question is? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So the document that you mentioned about bandwidth requirements gives several examples.
Yes.
But within the document, it says other scenarios can have their bandwidth requirement change depending on how you use them, such as real-time communication. So a lot of our customers are using it together with Teams, and Teams is real-time communication. So it's a pity that I don't see any numbers specifically for that type of real-time communication, or should I see the full-time video playback as some type of real-time communication, or is it still different?
Yeah, Dirk, very good question, and I'm in the same boat with you. Right, for Teams specifically, obviously, what we recommend our customers to use, where it's applicable, is to use Teams media optimization. I'm hoping you're across that functionality already, and it's a big, right? It is a big deal. In terms of Microsoft recommendations, sorry, I'm that guy who criticizes Microsoft Friends, or at least provides a constructive feedback. Right? I think those RDP protocol bandwidth requirements is a good step forward, but it's not comprehensive, right? And what we were preaching with our partners and customers is, if you are a relatively large deployment, right, and you want to be more precise with your estimations, particularly in the bandwidth consumption area, you have to run the pilot. There is no other way around it. You have to be running an environment that will reflect or will be proportionate to, you know, the resultant end state with that customer, with their user specificity, with their specific scenarios, etc. And that's probably the only way to be more or less accurate with the estimation. But I think that document is a good step forward. It helps us to, I don't know, have a more educated guesses, I would say.
Okay, good. Thank you.
No worries. No, my pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Very good. So, Philip, these links that you have in the presentation, perhaps if you don't mind pasting them in the chat,
sure,
perhaps
that's the easiest.
after the end of your presentation. Any time afterwards is fine. All right, and we might as well carry on if there are no more questions, no more further questions on this part, on the news part. We can already proceed with the next part. I would like to ask if Simon is ready. If you would like
I'm ready.
Have a head start. All right. Excellent. So I'll then give you the reins now. So
Thank you.
Okay, you should be able to share your screen now. Simon.
Yes.
So and to introduce Simon again, so Simon is Principal Technical Architect at TRUESEC Infrastructure AB, and he's based in Sweden. And today he's presenting a part securing Windows Virtual Desktop inside and out. So over to you, Simon.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get rid of the GoToMeeting one.
Oh, yes.
I were able to move it in.
If you click on those arrows there to...
Should be able to remove it completely. I'll just redo it.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Sorry about that. And I'm sorry that I am unable to share the camera. For some reason, GoToWebinar wouldn't pick it up. Oh, of course.
Okay.
So
Yes, we can see the screen now.
yeah, and you can't see the GoToWebinar.
No,
screen.
no, we can't see any other
Good.
parts. So just your presentation.
Yeah, then I'll just move that away for my sake. There we go. So thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I know that when I joined the TRUESEC just over a year ago, I joined to travel more. And one of the places I wanted to travel to were Australia. And then the pandemic you may have heard of hit the world. So I've been working from my home office. I think I've been outside of my office 5 times or so during the last year or so. But I'm very happy to join you virtually and on a topic that I feel very passionate about, especially considering what my company does and what we see happening all around the world. So I will be sharing both how you're securing WVD, why you should be doing that, and also what may happen if you don't. And as Zane said, please feel free to post your questions in the chat. We will have time to answer them later on. And it can be related to even like other topics that are related to Windows Virtual Desktop and the security of it, which aren't covered in the session because we have a limited amount of time and I have some different aspects to look into, but please feel free to post your questions at any time. So I think we will start by looking into the weakest link because this session is called Inside and Out. And for WVD, we have a couple of different areas we need to protect to ensure that the entire infrastructure, the entire implementation of WVD is secure. And I feel that we are sometimes missing the point in terms of security. EUC in general, so regardless if it's WVD, Citrix, VMware, and so on, have always had the security posture of EUC as a selling point, that it is more secure than running endpoints. And we can argue about that for years and years if you like to. But that doesn't mean that the implementation is secure by design. And it's enough that one single thing is misconfigured, and that may lead to the chain breaking. So we will look at it from a WVD perspective, which are the different links in the chain, and also how the minds of the attackers work, so that you know what to protect against if you are under attack. We will then go ahead into the demo section where I will be taking you through that entire chain, and it may be more things that you may want to secure other than the things I'm showing, but I will have somewhere between 5 and 9 demos depending on the time and how everything works, but it should be working just fine today. And we'll then summarize by setting this into context, because some of you may be sitting there across the virtual meeting room and thinking, okay, this sounds complicated. This sounds like something that only fits for larger organizations. And we'll look at that context because you may not necessarily have to secure all of your host pools in the same way. And not all organizations need to take the same things into consideration. So we'll look at the context of securing WVD as well. Like Zane said, I'm Simon, work as a Principal Technical Architect focused on secure workplace at TRUESEC. Been a Microsoft MVP for a couple of years now, certified trainer, spoken at a lot of conferences and still speak at a lot of conferences and user group all across the globe. I'm the founder of the Swedish WVD user group, and I've been a part of the WVD journey since it was first announced at Ignite 2018. So I've been part of even prior to private preview, I was a part of the program, helping Microsoft building the infrastructure, building the solution, and with a specific focus on the management of hosts and host pools. Since my background is in enterprise mobility and endpoint management. TRUESEC, just to set that into context, is one of the world's leading cybersecurity firms. So we do consultancy all across the globe, everything from secure development, secure infrastructure where I work. We do cyber security in general, so penetration testing, red teaming, things like that. And we are also very much into incident response. So we handle over 50% of the Swedish cybersecurity incidents, as well as security incidents all over the globe. Basically throwing the attackers out, ensuring that they don't get back in and rebuilding infrastructures. So with that background, I feel that I speak out of bitter experience because I've seen what can happen if you fail with that single little link and how that affects organizations. And speaking about the weakest link, I think this is a super important aspect. I got a question from a customer just a few days ago where I did a review of their physical Windows 10 client, and I came back with a lot of improvements. And then one of the architects came back to me and said, okay, but you haven't included this registry key. You haven't included this setting, which are recommended to avoid this kind of attack. And I think this is where many organizations miss the point. And I think especially now with WVD and Teams and all of the things we implemented when we were forced to, in just a matter of days or weeks, turn from the way we have been working for 20 years to a completely working from home or working from somewhere other than the office at least mindset. We are very good at focusing on the cool attacks, the things that we feel, okay, I found something that really can make our environment secure that very few people know about, so that's probably where the attacker will hit first. And that's not the case. What we see is that it's usually the small, simple things that should have been there that the attackers use to get access first. So therefore, we need to, in my opinion, it's better to have, to continue the alliteration of the chain, better to have a bit thinner chain, but where you know that all the links are equally strong, than having a very strong chain where one of the links is weak, but you are not aware of it. And that's what we will see when we head into this inside and out view of WVD. And I will soon change over to another picture that I think summarizes what we're talking about in a very good way. But do ensure to review that entire spectrum of technologies that need to be integrated from a WVD point of view, and ensure to secure them to an appropriate level, which we'll get back to later on. Because do remember, what you do with WVD is opening up your network for the outside world. That's what we have done with other EUC solutions for years, with VPN solutions or whatnot. And I feel that WVD, Citrix, even RD Gateway, VMware, whatever it can be, is a much, much better solution than VPN as an example, for the same reasons as we see here, and for the same reason that we'll see in my next slide as well. It's more secure. You can control it. You can make it more user-friendly, and you control every bit of that chain. And like I said, we had to make that switch very quickly. I know that Microsoft did a huge job in ensuring that they were able to spin up all of those session hosts that people were needing from one week to another. And that's also why I've built this session, because I find so many environments, regardless if it's WVD or whatever remote technology solution you're using that are, to be very blunt, catastrophic from a security point of view, since that wasn't the focus when we did this switch in how we're working. So now it's time to pick up the pace and get back on track and secure those implementations that may not be secure today. And I'm a big fan of the medieval ages. Like I've been reading since I was very, very young, all the literature I've ever been able to find. And I'm really like interested in how we were securing what was the most valuable thing we had 600, 700, 800 years ago, and that were by building castles. And if you look at how a castle looks, it's the same thinking as we will now add to WVD. It's basically a number of gates, a number of walls, a number of towers, different layers of security. When we talk about cybersecurity, we often talk about onions, but I find castles to be much more fun to talk about, and it's something I can relate to more than things I eat. So we will now look at the entrance first to the castle, the gate, so to say. We'll then head into how we can actually ensure that whatever is inside of our castle can't reach what things we don't want them to reach. We'll look into how our guards at the gates and in our towers will be able to both recognize intruders as well as throw them out if needed. So again, it's a multi-layer approach, something we all know, but this is in terms of a WVD context. So with that, we'll close that down, and please let me know if things are hard to see. But we will start with the essential aspect. Like, I've been involved in cybersecurity incidents over the last year with really, really big organizations, and where you would believe that it was hard for the attacker to gain access. And in practice, most cybersecurity incidents would have been prevented just by having the simplest security solutions available, and in this case, MFA. And I find so many aspects of Microsoft solutions where MFA isn't used. So this is the essential part. This is something everyone should have, which we'll get back to when we come to context. Every organization should have MFA applied to WVD and in practice to all their services. And today, there's nothing that limits you from using MFA for WVD, since that's part of the Azure AD free SKU. Then you get MFA for all of your Azure services with only the Authenticator app, but that's a lot better than not having MFA. I, however, prefer to apply MFA with conditional access, since that, in my opinion, gives a better user experience, and it gives us the ability to tailor the experience in a better way. So let's head into my conditional access rule. And in my case now, just to be transparent, we will be using my FinNemo user today, and that user is currently excluded from this rule so that it didn't get forced to do an MFA the first time. But I will soon remove the user from the exclude list. If we only want to target WVD with conditional access rules, we can do select apps here. And you would hope that it would be simple enough. But if we search for Windows Virtual Desktop here, you see that we have 3 different apps. These 2 are for the legacy implementation of WVD. So if you still run that, you need to use these 2 apps to secure that, and you need to have both. For the ARM-based one, which most organizations today are using, it's the top one here. So look for 9CD at the start of the app. That will give it away as the app you're looking for to secure. So in this case, we have selected that app, and we can do, so we have the filtering of users and groups up here. We can add multiple conditions, and this is not required depending on your use case, but I still wanted to show you one thing. Like I mentioned, I've been working with endpoint management for years and years. I absolutely love physical clients still, absolutely love Windows. But there are a lot of reasons why you should be using something other than Windows as your endpoints. And most of the endpoints you're used to managing, you can find here as configurable platforms. So if you only want to apply MFA to one of these, that's something you could do. But what happens if you have thin clients, Linux-based thin clients? How would you target them with a specific policy since they are not part of these platforms? Well, the trick is to do a very odd thing. You include any device and you exclude all devices in the list, because that will ensure that this rule will only be applicable to other operating systems than these 5. And that's the way I usually target Linux endpoints, to ensure that they get a specific conditional access rule as an example. But for now, let's apply this to everyone. And further down here, when we come to access controls, and I'm happy to answer any questions about conditional access as well, we can require different aspects here to allow access to the service. And for simplicity, I've only added.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So let's say if you have a customer whose WVD is presented to Azure, and you want to restrict Office 365 usage into Azure for the same user who is using his Office 365 onto on-premise as well, using conditional access.
So you want to, let's do like this.
So
could you write that question in the chat, and I will get back to it because I need to think a bit before I answer that. So please write it down in the chat, and I'm happy to reply to that later because I think I have an answer. You just need to think it through the logic first. But that's a really good question. So please write it in the chat so I don't forget it, and we'll take it at the end of the session. But that's a great question. You can add these other aspects as well. Do have in mind that if you are targeting other things, so if you're targeting Linux, multi-factor is basically whatever you can require for that. Compliant device needs for the device to be enrolled in Intune or in Jamf or in Config Manager. Hybrid Azure ED join is of course only applicable to Windows and so on, so that you don't apply a requirement that someone isn't able to fulfill. With that, let's close that down and open up a new window. And let's exclude our user, or remove from exclusions rather. And we will sign in to the web client. And you can, of course, also, and that's important to have in mind, that if you want to ensure that your users are only using the built-in RDP client or the store app, as an example, you can prevent them from connecting through the browser by conditional access as well. And that forced me to do an MFA. And let's see which phone that goes to now. Let's do like that so I know where it ends up. And we can here use any kind of multi-factor if we like. Do, however, have in mind that text-based MFA is something that Microsoft now officially advised against, that you should be using app-based or hardware-based tokens instead, rather than having text messages. So to go back to WVD, this is our gate. This is how we get into the service, and this is absolutely what you should be starting off with, focus on, and something everyone should have and in all honesty needs. Heading back to WVD then, This is the WVD portal, and you may have seen this. This was released a couple of months ago, I believe. It was first released by mistake, even like 3 or 4 months ago, but now it's in production. And this is when it comes to how to secure what you get access to once you reach your session host. And if you want or don't want data to either be uploaded to your host or downloaded from your host. And I'll, if we have time, show you a couple of other aspects of that as well. But don't forget that you are able to configure your RDP properties straight from the portal today. What I find that organizations do in many cases, especially looking at USB and drive storage redirection, where depending on your use case, you may or may not want that redirection to happen. So you get access from your session host to your physical device with USB tools or peripherals, or for the matter, USB sticks and hard drives. So ensure to review your use case and configure it here. And I find it like very, very user-friendly to do it in this way. But if you have specific requirements, if you want to add something in particular to your session host's connectivity, you also still have the RDP properties here, which basically allows you to do that automation bit as well. So ensure to remember this. It can be used for a number of different other purposes than security and to prevent from data exfiltration especially, but that's when you use your device redirection. So once we are in here, let's start our host. Hope it works. I'm sure you know that I've now been authenticated once to the service. I now get a prompt to authenticate to the session host as well. And you can see this as a downside. I know that myself and a lot of others included wants to see that seamless single sign-on through that entire process, regardless if you have ADFS or not. Currently, ADFS for Windows, at least, is a requirement. Oh, come on. But you can also view this as a second gate, something that you may have one account to connect to your WVD environment and one account to connect to whatever session host is behind that. And this is extremely useful if you, as an example, have privileged access workstations running in Azure. So where you have specific devices to manage specific systems within your environment. Then you can have one user account to authenticate to the service and then have multiple user accounts once you connect to the host. But for regular usage, it's of course a pain, and I hope they will be able to solve that soon. There are ways of getting around it, depending on the endpoint you're using. But if you're interested in that, we can take that later on. So now I'm in here, and it's easy, and it's baffling that organizations still believe that just because the VM is running in Azure, it's secure by design. It's not so that Microsoft patches your VMs. It's not so that Microsoft by design secures them. It's still a Windows 10 machine, and you need to secure that adequately. Like I said, we work a lot with security incidents and such. And if you're using any kind of EDR, in my case, I tend to use Microsoft Defender for Endpoints, ensure to cover your session hosts with Microsoft Defender for Endpoints or any other EDR as well. Do remember that these aren't non-persistent as such. So in practice, you need to be sure that if an attacker gets access to either of your session hosts as well, you need to be able to spot that malicious activity and should be sure to see it early. The quickest escalation of privileges that we have seen, which is basically an attacker gets access with a user account, a regular user account, to a physical host, and then they escalate those privileges up to domain admin or enterprise admin. The quickest we have seen is less than 2 minutes from initial access to domain admin. And if you don't have EDR on your session hosts, that may be enough, like you may miss that 2-minute window when you have the opportunity to stop an attacker. Defender for Endpoints is perfectly supported for personal desktops. So one user, one desktop, that is perfectly supported, nothing odd in that. If you have pooled desktops, which is usually the case, I think Microsoft claims that around 60 to 70% of all the WVD session hosts are pooled. That's supported today, but with an official limit of 25 concurrent user sessions. So if you have more than 25 concurrent user sessions on one session host, you are technically unsupported. It's not saying that it doesn't work, just that you may need to be aware that the amount of data that Defender for Endpoints gather for each user session can struggle to get into the console in an appropriate way if you have more than 25 concurrent sessions. You also need to have in mind how you are deploying Defender for Endpoints to your machines. That can be done either in your golden image if you prefer to use one of those, or it can be done using Config Manager in my case, or even Microsoft Intune. And once we're here, we see that this looks and behaves exactly as it would do on any other Windows 10 device. Speaking about Configuration Manager, which is something I really still like and see a huge value in, and that collaboration between the WVD team and the Microsoft Endpoint Manager team is something I've been a part of for years now. And it's really cool to see how they had a rough start understanding each other's worlds, I can tell you, but now they're there and they really see the benefit of it. And I think that will be even more obvious when it comes to things like MSIX app attach later on. But moving back to conditional access, what you can do with both Config Manager or Microsoft Endpoint Manager in this case, where you combine both Intune and Config Manager, you can co-manage your devices as well. So they can be managed by Intune partly and Config Manager partly. What that enables you to do is that compliant device rule, because you may run into a situation, and I think that's where on the topic of the question, that if I want to apply conditional access rules to my session hosts, you're perfectly able to do that. So if you don't want to access a user to access, like the question previously, Office 365 from your physical host, but only from your virtual host, you can limit that using conditional access, and you can even do that based on your organizational requirements. So if you require the device to have specific software, to have a specific registry key, to have something that you feel is important to you, you can select those custom compliance items within Config Manager and ask Intune to evaluate them and not grant access until they are fulfilled and the device have been marked as compliant. But those custom actions is still something that requires you to have co-management, so both Intune and Config Manager. They are working on extending that, but currently you need to have both. And do remember that, again, our session host over here, it's still just a Windows 10 machine. So as you spoke about previously, and what I see quite a lot of interest in is graphic acceleration. But something I definitely feel that we will see more and more often within even the session hosts are the ability to do BitLocker, are the abilities to do credential guard, which is something you absolutely should have on these devices, especially if they are pooled. That will require you to configure specific VM sizes that supports virtualization, and that may be expensive. But if you don't enable credential guard on these devices, then you will be in a situation where an attacker, if they gain local admin access to your session host, can harvest a lot of different credentials. And that goes for your on-prem environment as well. We also have, looking at other local aspects, UAC, ensure to user account, totally got lost words, user account control. Ensure to have that on. Treat your session host as if they were a physical device in a from a security aspect. We will, in just a second, look into how we can protect data in that way as well, but it's still just Windows. and ensure to keep it up to date. Marcel can help you with WVD admin. There are a ton of other features that you can use, but do have a patch strategy for your session host as well. How you do that is dependent on your knowledge, to be honest. How much you know about Microsoft Endpoint Manager, how much you know about image management and the automation of that, but keep them up to date. And our general advice, if you look at a regular Patch Tuesday, security patches are released. It takes less than 72 hours from the release of a patch until you have an exploit that someone that only knows how to use Google can use to attack an organization. So what we encourage our customers to do, regardless of size, is to try to patch everything within 72 hours of Patch Tuesday. And now some of you may be sitting there and say, yeah, that speed is insane, that's impossible. It's not. And we have the customers that have been able to do that, or at least strive towards it. But that's for another discussion. And to add to that, if Microsoft releases a zero-day vulnerability and out-of-band patch, it often takes less than 24 hours for an exploit to be available to the general public. When the vulnerability in the RD gateway were released earlier this year, the first customer that contacted us, and it wasn't a customer of ours, that has still not happened. So it was another organization that reached out to us and said, yeah, it took 4 hours until we were breached due to that 0-day. So keep your devices up to date. Moving back to Azure, and let's start with I think it's there. If you ever have reviewed the access controls of WVD on your application groups, you see that we can use the same access control as we would do to secure any other Azure resource. So down here, we have my 2 users that have access to this application group. That means that we, by using things like access reviews, automation, blueprints, policies, and so on, can be very flexible in how we assign the access to these host groups. We don't have in practice to go through assignments on an application group. We can just add it through RBAC if we prefer to do that. And that goes on all levels of WVD. That was one of the really cool benefits of that ARM migration, since you got that full access to RBAC. So ensure to limit who have access to what within your environment, and question your vendors if you use a third-party vendor. In my case, I have a third-party vendor here, which is owner on this, and they may not need to be owner. It's maybe enough with contributor. So ensure to review your access controls on all levels of WVD and assign them appropriately. And do remember that the assignment of the users to this is only RBAC. Once you're in your session host, once your users are in the session host, you may still want to lock down what they have access to. And you can do that using network security groups as well as Azure Firewall. And in this case, I will be using Azure Firewall. Let's see if I can find that. Nope. So Azure Firewall is a firewall, obviously. I think Microsoft jumped the gun on Azure Firewall Premium, which were announced, and now you can't find a trace of it anywhere, even in the documentation. So we will be getting a premium SKU of this as well. But today we have the WVD Firewall. And in here, you're able, if you have ever used a firewall, you should be perfectly fine in using this. And Azure Firewall is in practice, you can use network security groups as well for many of those aspects, but this is much more feature rich and enables you to have the same kind of management as you may have on-prem. If we head into my rules here, you have some pre-made or you have some documented rules on how to allow for WVD. It's a bunch of them. You have also FQD and tags, which have been working from time to time, so I tend to target them on specific rules. So if you, as I said, have any experience with firewall management, you will recognize this. So this is what allows the session host to connect to the WVD service and work as a session host. But I've also added an additional rule here, which will allow for Google. So now I will associate that firewall with my subnet and VNet for WVD. We'll head back to my host, and in just a second, we will see that things start to happen here, or rather not happen. Can take a while, but it should be applied soon. So what I'm trying to achieve now is a proof of concept. I want my users to be able to access their session hosts, but I don't want them to have access to anything other but Google. And you can, of course, have your own scenarios of that. And now I think we lost the connection, so it will hopefully soon reconnect. But Azure Firewall is great for that, both inbound and outbound traffic control. If you don't want to use network security groups. And why would you use either? Network security groups are free. Azure Firewall have a cost, but it's also more complex. So I would say that that's dependent on your use case, how granular you want to be, and especially when it comes to Azure Firewall Premium, which will have some super cool capabilities in terms of handling different kinds of URLs, classifications and such. That's something that I see as an option for larger enterprises or organizations that needs that higher level of security and higher level of control. So let's see if we can reconnect. Should be up and running soon. There we go. And now I can't reach that page, but I can reach Google. But that is also very dependent on your network design. And I'm not an expert in how to design virtual networks in Azure. There are a ton of documentation, some great sessions on that, but ensure to have that appropriate network design set up first, or else you will run into some issues when we try to secure that network as well. With that, so now we have secured the access, we have secured the host, we have secured the infrastructure, we have secured the access to the infrastructure. And you can add a ton of other demos to this. Data protection, like external services as well. But this is what I see as the simple bits and pieces that may not be applicable to all organizations. It's about context. It's about choosing and seeing what you require, what's your context of a specific user's access. That may be a very good reason to separate session hosts depending on what they have access to in their own virtual networks, to then be able to apply network security groups, Azure Firewall rules on them. So look into the context, both from your organization's point of view, as well as the individual user's point of view, and design your solution adequately. I will summarize and we'll take questions afterward instead. I think that makes more sense in this context. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat and we will answer them just after I've summarized the session. Think of that onion or that castle when you design, implement, and maintain your WVD environment. Multiple layers makes life hard for the bad people out there. And we see an increasing amount of attacks, more sophisticated attacks, more nation-backed attacks. And what I hear often is that, oh no, our organization is so small, we don't get hit. It's have nothing to do about that. The only completely bulletproof way to ensure that you aren't hit by ransomware is to go bankrupt. And that's something we have seen happening, that we have seen that there are indication of an ongoing attack, and that organization releases a bad quarterly result, and the attackers back out because they know there aren't any money in that organization. So the only way to be secure is by not earning money. Otherwise, it doesn't matter if you're small, large, public sector, private sector, regardless of which industry you're in, you can always be attacked because attackers don't care. They are only after money in many cases. So build that onion and always ensure to review it and ensure that it actually works. Work with Zero Trust even with your virtual machines. That's also key. Just because you have used MFA, you are in a session host, you are inside of your network, don't trust what happens on that session host by default. Ensure to require additional verification if a user wants to reach a specific sensitive part of your infrastructure. Zero Trust works as well with physical devices, physical networks, as virtual devices and virtual networks. And collaborate. As we have seen, I've now looked into the device management, identity management, network management. It can be about data compliance. Please talk among yourselves. That's by far the biggest challenge I have when I'm out at my customers. I get into one part of an organization and feel and hear that, okay, yeah, we don't talk to the networking team. Let's build our security ourselves. That only means that you will be paying more money, have a more complex environment, and likely not a more secure environment. So look into what different technology aspects do we touch when we use WVD, and ensure to gather all of those teams if there are multiple teams and build security together. The goal is, of course, this, that you have your guards in front of the castle, that you have your gate, and if you are able to show that I'm worthy of entering here, I'm trustworthy, you have the key to the gate. Once you're in, everything should be as expected. You should have access to whatever crown jewels you may have, and you can be secure even if a guard comes up to you while you're inside of the castle and asks you, who are you and what are you here? Why are you here? And then your users, your identity should be able to say, this is who I am, please keep allowing me access. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm now happy to answer any questions you may have. And if you have questions later on, you can always reach me here. You can also replace bindertech.se with truesec.se, works as well. LinkedIn, Twitter, blog, podcast. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Simon. That's been a really insightful presentation, and yeah, a lot in it. You packed a lot in it. That's really good. So we had a number of questions here, so we'll probably start with the earlier one from Snehanshu. So let's just look at the question there.
Yeah, how to restrict the user to not use Microsoft 365 with, I would assume it's within WVD. Is that correct? So that you want to restrict that your users is only allowed to access Microsoft 365 services from their physical hosts and only use the services you provide within the session host. Is that correct?
Yeah, can you still hear me? My network connectivity is really low, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, but that's the case. You want to ensure that they're only allowed to access Microsoft 365 services from their physical host and not within the session host.
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah, you're perfectly able to do that by using network rules, I would say, in conditional access. So since we are able to find the IP ranges and IP addresses of your Azure data centers, you can block access from those IP addresses within your session hosts. You can also, of course, have other aspects of that. So that depending on your environment, your endpoint, and so on, that you can have one rule that will only apply to your physical devices and one rule that will apply to your virtual devices within the Azure network. So that would be one way of doing it, which would, you could also possibly do that with networking rules, disallowing access to URLs. But in practice, I would say that it would be a more user-friendly and a more foreseeable result with conditional access rules. But base that on the IP addresses of your Azure infrastructure, and you should be good.
So correct me if I'm wrong, when we are talking about the networking, which means we are effectively talking about the layer 4 or IP layer. So meaning we are basically talking about the private IP addresses of the session host. But
no, we are talking about the external IP addresses.
Okay, so when we talk about the external IP addresses, which means we are talking about the Azure data center IP addresses. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And they get updated on a weekly basis, I reckon?
Yeah. You have the ability.
Yes.
Yeah, you have the ability to find those IP or to have them update for you. There are ways of doing, I have not done it in production, but there are ways which you may need to use other tools for, which can help you pinpoint that the IP addresses are coming from an Azure data center. That's something I use for cloud app security as an example, where you can have rules to say, allow only this traffic from these regions, because cloud app security is updated constantly. So there are ways of doing it. Network would be one thing, but other aspects would be to say, if you have config manager, do a rule where you apply a certain register key to your devices, and if that key is present, mark the device as non-compliant. That could also be one way of doing it. So I'm happy to follow up on that if you want to review the different options.
Right, okay.
You're perfectly able to do that. And
right,
to add to
right.
that,
Why did I ask this question? Yeah, you know why did I ask that question? Because this is pretty straightforward. Like if any user has a WVD and if he has like a M365 license and he has like access to the OneDrive, and obviously he would be able to reach out to whatever sites he want to, and then he can download whatever the malware and viruses, keep it into his WVD and access it from his on-premise as well. So that is the loose end, or that is the weakest chain I was thinking about, closing or blocking.
And you're absolutely right on that. And that's also, there are for that particular scenario, there are other ways of protecting against that too. So I would in general advise you to enable users to access OneDrive and such in their session host as well, and then limit either what they're able to download, what they're able to upload, and what they're able to transfer off that session host over the network. But it's
that's what the limitation with the that's what the limitation with the conditional access policy is, because it gets implied onto the user level rather than onto the device level. So when it is imposed onto the user level, which means whatever devices he is using, be it on premise, be it WVD, it will be applicable across the devices. So that is something which I wanted to get some clarity on.
Yeah, but I'm happy to look into that.
But yeah, thanks for information.
But please feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to give you the options, because you can do what you're describing with other tools as well, in terms of controlling. Even if you allow download to the session host, you can control where you're able to place that file in terms of internal services and such with other tools, either within Windows or within Microsoft 365. So if you like, please send me an email with your scenario, and I'm happy to provide you with the options there.
Sweet as. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, no problem. Great question. Let's see. What other questions did we have? I think
yes. So we had a question as well, Philip. I think from Philip there, when you were covering firewall.
Yeah.
I suppose Philip was saying there's a high cost entry point for Azure Firewall, but any thoughts on robust alternatives for SMB customers?
I would say see how far you can get with network security groups, because as you say, it's a high entry, and that's the same thing with like Azure AD domain services and such. So then you have to figure out ways around it. Network security groups would be one thing. Other things to consider is, okay, what do you want to protect? Is it that you want to limit internal traffic or external traffic? And for that, you have either Defender for endpoints, you have, so Defender for endpoints, network security groups, but you also have the ability to like look into third-party firewall and network control options that may still have a price tag, but it may not be as expensive. I tend to avoid third-party tools as much as I can, but network security groups should be a very good place to start. And if not, I would definitely look into Defender for endpoints. It's also a very expensive license per user, but you will get a lot of different benefits from it. So it's dependent on your use case, but if you only want that network control, network security groups should be a good first place to start.
If I may just add to my question, and look, we have a very open group, and I hope you don't mind, interrupting each other. Look, we well understand how NSG works, and we all well understand the limitations of NSGs and the difference between NSG and firewall, and it's massive, right? Especially with the new functionality that comes into Azure Firewall, right? So there's no comparison. There is no reasonable gaps that you can cover with NSG comparing with firewall. I guess my question was more around your practical experience, and I think you already covered it by mentioning that you're trying to avoid those third parties. I have similar approach in general, but yes, in some cases, in SMB particular, right, we have a big gap where we do want additional protection, but the high cost entry point, when we're talking about 20 to 50 user environment, and you will have to add a significant portion of the infra cost just for the firewall function, it becomes not feasible, right?
No. What are you trying to protect? If we turn the question around, what are you trying to limit or protect against?
Look, it can be that general firewall functionality of, let's say, some level of website web filtering, right? And yes, the advice is maybe use third-party products, maybe use cloud-based products for it, right? It can be a use case of where a customer is trying to secure certain traffic between WVD and existing infra in Azure, or to at least have an inspection functionality there, not just brute limitation. There are use cases, and again, we have to kind of squint and say, yes, Azure Firewall is your best bet, but
and I absolutely agree on that. If you have those requirements, especially within Azure with traffic inspection and such, you will end up in Azure Firewall or third-party products. But like I said, I tend first not to use them, and second, I'm not a networking person as such. I know that I've had customers, I have colleagues that have used all different aspects, like the third-party, the network vendors, virtual appliances with high success. I know that we are looking into Fortinet as an example now. So there are options, and I absolutely agree that there are use cases for it. And if you want to protect certain URLs, the only other option I would see for that from a Microsoft point of view would be Defender for endpoints, and then you still have that high price point for SMBs. The only thing I would say to get that into context is, you would get a lot of other aspects too, but it may not be suitable for that customer segment as well. So I think you're like, when I started to work with WVD, what drove me to it were the ability to have a small organization get access to enterprise grade EUC solutions. And as you say today, from a WVD service point of view, you're able to do that. But once you start to look into security, identity, and all of that, it's still not really applicable to SMBs yet.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Yes, we are spoiled because we have that, democratic VDI now with enterprise functionality almost end to end. And when those gaps are identified, like, high price point, high entry point for the firewall function, we kind of getting, oh, we should have this. Come on, Microsoft, bring it up. So we are a little bit spoiled there. I do agree. I understand.
And I think you're like the best way of do that, and that's to everyone in this group, keep providing Microsoft with that feedback, because they are able to change. We saw that with Microsoft 365 Business Premium, which is one of my absolute favorite licenses, where they have continuously added, especially security features to that. And I think the challenge here is mainly not WVD, it's the challenge in, if you provide a WVD team with the feedback on Azure Firewall or network security groups or whatever it can be, they need to reach out to another product group, which are like responsible for that, and they want to have their revenue. So that's the internal aspects of Microsoft. But great question, and I'm sorry that I didn't have a better answer to it.
No, that's okay. It was more of a, peering into your experience of, you work in a security field, and my sort of guess was that potentially you have that field stories that you're happy to share. And if there were specific products, that would be nice for us to know, go out and evaluate and see if they are applicable to our use cases.
Yeah, and what's, like I said, what we are looking into is Fortinet for a number of reasons, but especially that you're able to run that virtually. I have had customers previously that have used Citrix NetScalers, which is also a steep price point to begin with. But other than that, I don't have experience to say that use this or that. It's Fortinet and NetScaler is what I've used, apart from the built-in ones.
That's okay. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. And my go-to webinar window have frozen. So if there are any additional questions, please feel free to read them for me from the chat, because I'm unable to see them now.
Oh, okay. Thank you for covering this, Simon. It was a good question as well from Philip. And there were a few comments there from Maxim, but I think it was mostly to add links here to helpful resources.
Yeah.
And if I may, there is one more point, and I'm not sure if you dealt with this, Simon, and it looks like it's in your realm, but it's the topic that is not brought up very often, and in the context of WVD in particular, CASB, right? That question with OneDrive and using alternative tenants to download content from and exploit can be avoided with CASB.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's one of the most underestimated products in the Microsoft 365 portfolio, the Cloud App Security. And it's like, when you start to explore it, it's amazing what you can do with it. So absolutely, like I have a demo of Windows Information Protection, but Cloud App Security is something I tend to use in all of my products now, independent of that is WVD, Teams, or endpoints.
I have 2 questions with respect to CASB. So first question is, let's say you have 100 customers, 100 seats, and out of which only 50 users want to use WVD. So CASB doesn't actually support particular users. I mean, you can't scope it only onto specific 50 users, because it gets enabled onto the tenant level. So meaning, if I have to use it on 50 users, I'll have to purchase the license for all 100 users. So that is one. And second is, this is again implied onto the user level rather than onto the device level. So I'm not too sure. I'm not like 100% confident whether CASB will be able to solve that problem.
But you can combine Cloud App Security with conditional access, and that would enable you to do that IP combined with other different options and do session control using Cloud App Security. So you would still, and that was one of the things I would be happy to share with you, that on that topic, that if you have those requirements, you have the ability to integrate Cloud App Security with Intune to get that flexibility in terms of networking, certain like controls on device level and so on. So that's one option. Licensing is a challenge, and I'm certain there are other people in this call that are way better on licensing than I am. Even if I like licensing, I'm a very odd person in that way. I love to talk about Microsoft licensing. But in practice, you're right. In theory, Microsoft claims that you are able to scope this, but it's a pain to do so. And I would, in practice, advise against trying to do that, because if you were to get a review of your licensing, you could end up in a very hard discussion with Microsoft. So yes, that's a challenge from a cloud app security perspective, that you need in practice to license your entire tenant. But as with Defender for Endpoints, I would say that you can get so many amazing benefits from it. So that value you get, even if it's an expensive or a relatively expensive license, is, in my opinion, definitely worth it. And if you can then apply it to WVD as well as other aspects, go ahead. And especially, I've done plenty of session on securing teams as well. And cloud app security is an essential part of that, especially in the world we're living today. So cloud app security, to protect what you can and can't do in terms of downloading, uploading, accessing things from your session host, great way of using it. And that also applied to your previous questions on OneDrive.
Great, thank you, Simon. All right, so we had a lot of nice, good questions here.
Yep.
For you, and we had also, well, I hope, firstly, I wanted to confirm from Snehatshu if all the questions were covered for you that you had in mind, and yeah, just let us know. Yeah, excellent, thank you. All right, and we had the next part, actually was Ask Me Anything with Roshan. And I was wondering if Roshan, if you had anything specific planned for us.
I mean, to be honest, nothing specific. So since the discussions were going on, it was good that Simon was giving insight into the various security features that most of us learned. So it was a good discussion. So nothing in specific. Philip covered some of the upcoming features. Again, I would encourage everybody to try them out in your validation pools if you have. Simon, thank you very much for that session. It was very helpful, informative for me. There are certain things that I never tried, so which probably I'll start doing it now.
Yeah, great, thank you. And Zane, if since I can't read the chat, could you please just gather all of those questions and asks for links and send to me, and I'm happy to provide you that afterwards to distribute to the group.
Yes, of course, we will. We can do that. I think that's pretty much it. If I missed anyone, if I missed any questions in chat, guys, this is a time you can voice it up. You can bring it up to our attention now. It's the right time to do that if you would like. But having said that, I think it's a good time for us. Okay, Maxime is messaging there. Sorry, the Microsoft Cloud of Security Ninja training is here, right? Yes, thank you for sharing this with us, Maxime. So it's a handy link that Maxime is sharing here in the chat for a link to tech community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for Ninja training. Fantastic, thank you for that. So it's time we could enable our cameras now, guys, if you have access to your cameras, and we could just, I suppose, have final, final face-to-face chat here, and there will be a picture time coming up too, so we can then have an opportunity for a group photo as well. So not sure if your cameras, okay, here we go. We just need to change the view here, I think. All right.
Well, I'll do my secondary camera. So sorry for the green screen and the bad quality, but here I am at least.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. We can see Dirk here, and yes, Simon. Good to see you guys. Roshan, Roshan here as well. Awesome. Yeah, so yeah, today we have a slightly smaller group, but it will be still recorded. We had a few guys who were on the session as well, and they kind of excluded themselves they had to go, but it will be in the recording, so they can still view it afterwards, I suppose. And yes, Snehanshu, we can see you now as well. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome. And Simon, we still can't seem to see your camera.
Oh,
Not even
sorry.
but,
If you turn it on, it's much
okay, I can see you now. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, all right. Oh, and it disappeared.
Yeah, sorry. I'm back in just a sec. I just tried
Oh,
if
yeah.
the one were working. So there we are. Now I'll stay.
No, excellent. Well, yeah, it was a really good presentation, Simon. I really thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
It was really insightful, and users, our members, were really asking for something like that for security. Security features that can help them to secure WVD on Azure. So it was really, really, really helpful. Right. So I think we could then take this opportunity for a group photo now. So let me just see who else is there. Oh, sorry, we've got a question here from Brice. Is it Brice? Oh, Brice is saying, hi everyone, I'm in the middle of delivering training, so I won't be able to turn my camera on. Okay. Just listening though. Okay. And he's also thanking you, Simon, for excellent presentation.
What I could say was that I followed a lot of other meetups from other groups across the globe, and often what I see is that there is a lot of very, very deep technical information in it, almost development, and where you have to be very, very concentrated all the time, and if you miss 1 second, well, that was it. You can't follow the story anymore. And what Simon did was it gave a lot of information, but on a level that was just deep enough to be able to understand everything about it without having to be the super nerdy, techie, whatever guy. So for me, it was one of the best presentations that I had if I compare them to all the other meetups that I already followed. So thanks for that, Simon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you once again. All right, so we'll have a group photo now. So we usually say something like WVD on the count of 3. So might as well follow this outline for the group photo. All right, so let's just try it. So 1, 2, 3.
WVD.
All right. Thank you, guys. That was awesome.
Thank you very much.